nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have anything over here. Can everybody make sure that your cell phones are either on silent or off, please? Okay, we don't have anybody for public forum tonight, so we're going to move ahead to be the minutes of the regular meeting for July 27th. Are you coming up here because I'm not talking loud enough?
Oh, is it not working?
Oh, never mind, I'm okay.
Thanks. Can you turn it off?
Are you okay? Okay. I'll take a motion for the minutes of July 27th, please. It says Dingman in a second by Mr. Nodine. Any questions, corrections on these? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so since there's no financial reports, we're going to move over to Mrs. Hinman. Mrs. Hinman?
Good evening. Give me just a second. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. I also have a physical copy for all of you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I have one, but I can get you another later. Yep, absolutely. So good evening. I'm here tonight. 2 board meetings ago, Cindy Hay talked with you about staff development and the framework and strategic plan in which we're doing that. And I know some questions came up about interventions at the building levels. So I know Mr. Van Orman presented last meeting, and tonight I'd like to talk to you about what we're going to do at the secondary school. So we know that there were some causes for learning loss. A couple of those things, COVID-19, there was a struggle with remote and hybrid instruction and not having physical teachers in front of students. A lot gets lost when you don't have that personal face-to-face. Down at the bottom, you see a link. I will send you a copy of this. That is a link to the United States Department of Education, and on that is a 61-page document that talks about the impacts of COVID on students. And that is not just Red Creek. That's not just New York State. That's not just the country, but it's global. So there's a lot of information in there, and I will forward you to that. There are some gaps in background knowledge. Not being in front of a teacher means that there's going to be some gaps. And we need to work on filling those gaps and really focus on our students here in Red Creek. We do know that there was an increase in mental health needs as well. With that, we have a framework which we are addressing some SEL, and we have direct plans to do that. Also at the high school, what I've noticed is that we have an attendance concern. We have an increase of students that are not present in front of our teachers, and we're going to be working on focusing on why those students aren't in school and some direct measures on addressing those attendance concerns. This slide here is just a quick reminder. I know you've heard this throughout the presentations that have come before you, but Tier 1 is when you address a whole class. That's an intervention that you use for every single student. With that, it's research-based instruction, it's core instruction, and what that comes down to is what, not only your base instruction, but what helps the entire class rise. As you go up the triangle, the Tier 2, targeted small group intervention. Somewhere along the line, we have something that indicated that Tier 1's not working for some of our students. With that, we need to do some targeted interventions for at-risk students. Many times that's AIS. And we target skills in those groups. Those groups are about 15 or less. We prefer smaller, but typically it can be up to 15 students. As you move up the triangle, you see Tier 3. Tier 3 is special education. Those students are identified by CSE, and I'm going to go a little deeper into each of these as we go on. But that is special education. They're identified by the Committee on Special Education, and they follow an IEP, which is their individualized education plan. It is scripted for that student, and those services are prescribed for whatever it is that deficiency is at the level. If a student is at Tier 3, that means whatever was done at Tier 1 wasn't really working so much. Tier 2, still not working. Tier 3 needs more intensive and very prescribed things done for them to address that learning disability or learning gap. It's going to seem a little repetitive, but we're going to break this down a little more. This is what we are going to do at the secondary school level. Grades 9 through 12, Tier 1 again, services all students. We have a vocabulary committee that came together in March, and they started working on what could they do to increase literacy at the high school. Literacy is tough at the high school. In the elementary school, you can do phonemic awareness, you can talk about phonics. In the high school, it's not the same. Research shows around 3rd grade is when some of those things become ineffective. So when you fast forward and get them all the way 9 through 12, vocabulary integration and cross-curricular connections is really what gets that firing and gets kids learning. So when you have a word, words can go cross-curricular. A word in math and a word in social studies can be the same word and have 2 different meanings. So talking about that. Academic recovery is still going to be offered at the high school 4 days a week, 2 hours a day. There's now going to be learning center access. That'll be during study halls, and actually on the next slide I'll go through the details of that. And we also have paper tutoring still. Tier 2 is that next level. They're identified through an RTI process. At the high school, they've failed a course, they've failed a Regents exam, or a teacher is noticing a deficiency in a skill. This response to intervention at Tier 2 can be fluid. A student's not locked in forever. If once they've got a skill, they can move out. But then if they become deficient in another skill, they can move back in. The essence of this model is that it's not a locked in forever. So we'll be addressing that in our AIS classes and specific Learning Center targeted groups. So we can pull kids out with our Learning Center person having a K-12 literacy background. She'll be able to pull out and work on those specific skills that teachers are seeing deficiencies in. Tier 3 again is special education. They're identified through Mrs. Herbst's office on the Committee on Special Education with the team she works with. We use 3 models at the high school level. There's a resource model, there's a consultant teacher model, and a special class. Resource had been used in the past, and we're actually bringing it back this year, and we'll be offering 3 sections of that at the high school. And on another slide, I'll tell you specifically what that looks like. So honing in, focusing in, Tier 1, vocabulary integration and cross-curricular connections. I met with Mrs. Brewer, who's working on the vocabulary group, and she shared some information with me. And at the high school, we're going to be working on a word of the day. It'll be taught in advisory. It will be then reintroduced throughout classes throughout the week so the students have exposure. A lot of intake on vocabulary is visual. So in addition to that teaching, it'll be displayed on all of the televisions that you see around the school. It'll be on our front bulletin board out near Mr. Smiley's office. It'll be outside of classrooms. Each classroom has a small bulletin board. And there'll actually be a word wall in the large group instruction room. So kids will see these words all the time, and it'll become ingrained in their vocabulary so they start using them. The cross-curricular teaching of words that have synonyms. One word, like I said earlier, can mean one in one subject, one in another, showing those connections, but also showing how the content connects all together. So the teachers are working on a system for that as well. An important skill at the high school level is teaching words in context. When a student sees a word in isolation, they don't have clues as to what that word means. By teaching students how to read around a word and figure it out in context, gives them a lifelong strategy on how to, I don't know that word. Let me read around for what I do know and apply that and then try to find their own meaning for the word. That is a lifelong skill. The other thing that this group tapped into, Larry Bell has the 12 power words. And the research behind the 12 power words is those are the most frequent words that are used in standardized testing. And they're verbs, they're actions, they ask them to do something. By doing that and teaching the kids explicitly those words, students will now look at a question and try to figure out what it is they're supposed to do. And they have a better shot of answering the question correctly, even if they might not know some of the vocabulary in it, because it tells them the action and what that question expects. So by doing that, we're actually arming our students with a little bit more. Additionally, at Tier 1, like I said earlier, we're going to offer till 5:30, 4 days a week. I already have teachers signed up to do this, so that's set and ready to go. A certified teacher runs academic recovery. Students can come in, get extra help, work on essays, study skills, study groups, make up academic time if they've missed school. Really a great program. The Learning Center access, that will happen during study halls, lunch, after school, or can be assigned by a teacher. If a student misses class, they can go make up a test during there. We can also use this as a testing center for special education. And the benefit of this is it's staffed by a certified K-12 literacy teacher who will be able to assist with increasing those literacy skills. And again, paper tutoring is available 24/7. I'm hoping to see an increase in use in that this year. Oh. It decided to go away. Mr. Robbins, this is on the screen. Is there something I need to do? Man, I was on a roll, too. Gotta love that.
Gotta
What's
love
that
technology.
Up on top, Karina?
What's that?
What's the
It's saying that the Microsoft 365 is out. So let me
You
see if
have
I
it on
can.
your-
Let me see if I can do that again.
Is it on your?
I got it. All right, thank you. All right, so Tier 2, those are the ones that we identify that the Tier 1 is everything that we're doing there isn't necessarily working. Those kiddos need a little bit more. So academic intervention services, those are students who have failed the class, a region exam, or they can qualify by teacher recommendation. This year, the master schedule allows for 4 sections of math, 1 section of science, and right now, English and social studies will actually be targeted groups pulled into the Learning Center. Tier 3 are our special education students. Describing those 3 models a little more in depth. Resource class works with a certified special education teacher and explicitly works on the goals that are written in the IEP. 1 section of the IEP identifies goals that are specific to that student that need to be worked on, and data needs to be collected. And then at the end of the year when they do their annuals or any of their yearlies, they go over those. So it's really important to focus on those. I believe I have 3 sections of resource this year, so I'm really excited to have that back in the schedule. The consultant teacher model, it's a smaller class, typically with 2 teachers servicing the student population. It is a less restrictive environment for our students. Those are identified students, but in that classroom can also be general education students. Okay, so that is not explicitly special education students, but there is 1 content area teacher and 1 special education in there to support those students. The special class is a more restrictive environment. It has a lower student to teacher ratio. Many times there are 2 teachers in the room, again, a content area teacher and a certified special education teacher. However, we have a unique situation at the high school. We currently have 2 of our special education teachers at the high school that are certified in content areas. I have 1 that is in social studies and 1 that is in living environment. So we're able to capitalize on that, and then I can have 1 teacher in that room with that smaller group. It's important to know that special class is most restrictive, so after talking with Mrs. Herbst, there are eligibility requirements. You have to be very intensive to be in that special class. So just in conclusion, our next steps moving forward, we're identifying the student needs, implementing that systems approach for interventions at all tier levels, and really doing the checks and balances to make sure we're servicing our students as needed. And then we're going to continue to improve the instructional design and approach, and that was previously presented to you by Mrs. Hay. I know that was kind of quick. Any questions?
Thank you. Does anybody have
Thank
any
you.
questions?
I think I did.
I have one real quick while you're
Maybe you
looking, if that's
answered
okay,
it.
Jolene.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Okay. On your Tier 2, yep.
Yes.
So just because I'm not sure if you said it or not, but this is 4 sections a day, a week?
So it's 4 periods over.
So you have
So
4
it's 4 periods.
periods of
So I have
PX.
1 teacher that will be able to teach an A-day and a B-day section, and I have
Okay.
another teacher that's going to teach 1 A-day and 1 B-day section.
Okay,
So it's 4
does-
separate classes with 4 different populations in it.
So does it give these kids an opportunity to meet every day, every other day? Or do you
So
not
they're
know
going to
yet?
meet. It's every other day.
Okay.
Every other day for 42 minutes.
Okay. Is that the same as this past year? or more or
Actually,
less?
AIS services, as I look back at the master schedule, were not addressed as much as this. It is not the same.
Okay.
Because the master schedule was tied up with other classes. So the guidance counselor and I were able to work out and try to get as many spots for AIS classes. It made our regular classes a little bit bigger, but I'm not going to lie to you, they're not huge. We're talking like 15.
Okay.
We've worked really hard to keep our class sizes under 20 at the high school.
The reason I asked is because I think, if I remember correctly, having a high school student right after
Yes.
right after COVID, everybody was required to take math AIS.
So yes, what
so
we
I didn't
did.
know if that was still happening, or we've been able, since they've been in school, to restrict to who necessarily needs that service.
Great question. So I know that when we came back from COVID, when Mr. Van Orman was working on the master schedule, he added a one-period learning lab to some of the math classes. So if you were perhaps in geometry, or I believe it might have been Algebra 1, you had the teacher for every single day, and then you got it every other day. You got an extra
Yes.
42 minutes. I don't have that for every class, but instead what I've done is freed up so that it's not going to be a tier 1 offered to everyone.
Okay.
It's going to be more intense for those kids that need tier
Okay.
2. So it might be the same time, but I'm repurposing who's going in there based on need.
Well, that's why I was wondering if,
Yes.
if this amount of section actually serviced everybody, if we were back to that, but it sounds like there's an opportunity for kids that
And it's really
needed to
challenging because one
distinguish.
section of geometry, they weren't anticipated to take the Regents exam, so they actually did not get that extra. So there was a little bit of an equity there.
Gotcha.
Here, this lets us focus on the tier 2 students. And with that, we actually had all of our students take the geometry exam. So we don't want any of our kids to have inequitable education or access to that. So when it was implemented after COVID, that was a tier 1 for almost everybody, but it
Okay.
didn't get scheduled quite correctly. Ms. Pasker and I worked really hard to see how we could do that, and we couldn't fit that to make it equitable for every student. We need to amp up tier 1. We need to do really great instruction at tier 1. We need to put some interventions in at tier 1 for every student. And that really is our focus this year, so that those sections that we had for the little extra for COVID can now go to the kids that were showing a deficiency from the whole group.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
does that
you.
make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Bliss.
So all of this looks great. I wanted to jump back to your first slide, well, really your second slide. A lot of your presentation goes over, the instruction gap,
Yes.
which is fantastic. There were a couple of other things that you mentioned. One was the increase in mental health,
Yes.
and the other was attendance concerns. Around attendance concerns, I was just wondering if you guys were looking at re-implementing the perfect attendance, a free yearbook with perfect attendance, or, going back to some sort of incentivized program like that again, which I know went away with COVID.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit tough right now. I'm not sure that we'll be able to implement it this year because COVID's still here. So when students are absent due to COVID, that it's hard to track that in perfect attendance. So I'm not sure that we're going to implement it for this year. In the future, maybe.
Okay.
And it's still something we have a little bit of time where we can discuss and maybe do. Even though we're in that endemic stage, COVID is still alive and well in many households. So
Absolutely.
so it's hard to do that and not have that disparity for students that do miss because of COVID or other reasons. So
Okay.
I'm not saying it's completely off the table,
Right.
but definitely a topic for further conversation.
Okay, awesome. And the other thing I was wondering about, and you don't have to necessarily know right now,
Sure.
but maybe we can get kind of a report in the future on it, is the mental health section. If, something like this that kind of shows what the plans are, what is it that we're looking at going to do to help those high school students with, those severe mental health needs, that would be wonderful as well.
Yes, I absolutely think we can follow up with that, but I know what I can touch on is that this is my third school district I've worked in, and I've never seen the ability to have so much counseling support here in school, because we do have Delphi Rise, we do have Wayne Behavioral, we do have interns that come in and work under our psychologist, our social worker. So the fact that we have a psychologist, we have the social worker, we have 2 outside agencies right down the hallway. We have a lot of counseling support district-wide, but in the high school specifically, and you do see that utilized regularly. I absolutely think that we should be able to report out to you the long-term, the framework for that, the plan, absolutely. But in looking at the other districts I've worked in and compared to here, our students have a lot of access to a lot of resources that we need to tap into.
Right. I will say, the experience that I have seen with people that I know close to me, there's definitely a ton of counseling services. I do know that some kids aren't being identified as needing those services that really do need those services. And I can speak personally on this. So, are there other things that are also going to be done to help identify those students that may not seem like the typical students that might need that help, or other things that can be done other than you need to just go and see a counselor? Because sometimes kids, there can be a stigma that's attached to that. So other things that we might be planning to kind of touch on some of those things to help kids understand how to cope and stuff.
Absolutely. So yesterday, we had the district PBIS team together. And so I don't want to talk too deep into it because I know Mrs. Hayes probably going to touch on it in the future. But we brought together not only for the positive interventions, but to talk about things like that. And there are some programs out there that I believe we're reviewing right now that are daily check-ins. So it's not just that surface level, because a kid can look you in the face, say, "Hey, I'm fine," and they're not okay. So something that digs a little bit deeper. I don't know the next step of that per se, so I don't feel knowledgeable enough to talk about that. But I do know we are looking at those things for that reason. We need to check in with students daily and make sure that they are okay. If they are not okay mentally, we're not going to be able to reach them educationally. So it's about teaching that whole child, and I mentioned that in my update when we were out at our retreat, our leadership academy. That's what Marion School District talked about, was the whole child and making sure we have the whole framework and get them here so we can get them here. Sounds cliche, but that's really what it is. And so we need to make sure that they are mentally and physically okay so that we can reach them educationally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you for your time. Okay, we're going to keep moving. We have several items under e-new business certified staff. I don't know if anyone's looking to separate or can have.
Can you separate F, please?
So would you, are you going to?
Yeah, I was
I'll
gonna
make a motion for
make a
E1,
motion
A through E.
C.
I'll second.
What?
E1, A through E, motion.
Do we have to do it?
So it would just be A through C, 'cause there's no D and E.
No.
So is that, yes? Okay,
E1, A through C.
okay. All right, and we'll take a second by Mrs. Allen. Okay, so we're E1, A through C. Any questions? Okay, great. Mr. McDonald, when you're ready.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Okay, so I'd be open to taking a motion for E1, G through K, unless anyone's looking to separate anything else.
I'm looking to separate I, please.
Okay, so would you make the motion for E1, G, H, J, and K?
Yes.
Okay, so motion by Mrs. Allen. Can I have a second, please? Mr. Nodine? Okay, so it's E1, G, H, J, and K. Questions? Discussion? Mrs. Dingman?
I have a question, two.
Okay.
First for H, it says the start date is August 22nd through the 31st, which is over a 4-year period. And I know you said it, the dates aren't set in stone, but why wouldn't that have a 4-year, 10-year? It's more than 4 years.
It should be a 4-year.
Okay. Could we just have that corrected?
Yeah, so basically she's starting as soon as possible. Is what
Right.
She's doing.
And it says that it goes till August 31st of 2026. And I just noticed that. So we'll have that corrected. And then what does that mean that the appointments are managerial but follow the admin?
So it means that they're it's like Bill's position. He actually follows the administrative contract for most of his all the rights and responsibilities in your contract.
So wouldn't they be just part of the administrative contract?
Not here. They haven't
Okay.
been.
I know that the admin contract does include the athletic director.
It did previously. I mean, that would be part of their unit, yes. So the managerial piece is usually to indicate bills. It would fall in the administrative unit.
So I think that
We can strike the managerial piece, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I think that, position is actually listed as the athletic director / community center director.
Correct.
So I think there would need to be a change
In the contract.
in general, because that technically, that position as a whole doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Correct. Yes. So originally it was athletic director, AD. Then it switched when the athletic director left and we hired an athletic director / dean of students / IT position. It still fell in that part of the contract, which this will also replace that. It's just we've switched around the responsibilities.
So it is part of the administrative contract,
It
or
is,
it's
correct.
managerial?
Yeah, the managerial language is weird to me, to be honest with you.
Okay, so they're not managerial with fringe
With-
benefits?
In content to that, yes.
Okay,
You're correct.
okay.
It would fall completely under the
Administrative contract.
Administrators Association.
So there's
Yep.
probably an MOU
Yeah.
drafted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, it would just be under their contract language. For
Okay.
Bill's position, it would be an
So
MOU.
it's separate.
If we struck managerial, it'd probably be cleaner, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, can we use the August 22nd date to do, or you're just going to update it for 4 years from whatever date she starts?
She's looking for her release date. Yes.
Okay, so, and then we're removing considered managerial.
Yeah,
that-
just put under the administrative contract.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? And I'm assuming that, did you make the motion?
No.
G,
Did I?
H, I, K.
Kim
We have a
Allen.
motion
Okay.
and a second.
Thanks, Kim. Are you okay with the changes
I
to
am.
E1? Okay, thank you. Mr. Noda, what?
Who was number 2? Sorry.
I think it's Mr. Nodine was the second.
Changes to,
So we're E1H would strike out the managerial
yes,
comment, and then the dates will be adjusted for the correct end date.
I will make that motion.
You just had a second, but I appreciate that too. Okay, any other questions? We have 2 motions, no seconds. Just kidding.
We're close.
Okay, when you're ready.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on. I'll take a motion for E1F, please. Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser, and a second by Mrs. Dingman. Any questions on this appointment? When you're ready, sir.
Yes.
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 Abstain.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, E1I, the last one in this group. Could I have a motion, please? Mrs. Dingman, and a second by Mrs. Kaiser. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just have.
You have a question?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Could we just have the last name spelled properly?
Yes.
And the same thing for her appointment says managerial. Would that also be updated?
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct.
I think it's just on the agenda, because I think her name is correct in the appointment.
It's in the supplements,
Oh, okay.
but on the agenda.
Gotcha.
A question.
Yes.
On the agenda, well, actually, it's in the packet too. What's the right title? Is it just, is grant director more than just 21st century?
Yeah, so there's other grant director, there's other grant
Dr. Corey.
responsibilities that will.
People can't hear you on the microphone. Thank you.
There are other grant opportunities or responsibilities that will be available in that position itself. So it's 21st Century Grant is the larger piece, that managerial piece of that $527,000 a year. And then it comes with other responsibilities, other administrative responsibilities that will include all of the grant work in the district.
Okay, so we are not going to have other administrators involved with that grant writing as originally planned?
They'll still be involved in it. They'll
Okay.
just have some oversight from grants. Grants worked collaboratively with each other, right? So when you have somebody who's coordinating them, they can leverage grants off of each other, and it's really important to kind of house that together. So there will be more of a team approach on that than we've had in the past.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? You ready?
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Okay,
Congratulations.
moving on to E2 classified staff. I'd entertain a motion for E2 A through F. If there's, Mrs. Dingman, did you make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. And a second by Mrs. Allen. Any questions about this group?
I have a question.
Yes.
With regards to a driver resignation, if we were to open the doors tomorrow for school, would we be able to be fully staffed? Are we fully staffed?
Currently, we are fully staffed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that means that we have to make some alterations in our actual runs, but we are able to handle those runs currently.
Thank you.
Does that mean allowing anybody that wants transportation to participate with transportation, or is that still with the higher level of parents dropping students off?
So we are allowing anyone who wants or is looking for transportation to have it. We did that last year as well. A lot of people did continue to transport their own child in, and we certainly appreciate that. It does take some of the weight off of us, and we can expand our fleet out a little bit. So if there are people out there who are looking to do that, we certainly would not discourage them from doing that. But we put out a memo or letter that the request for transportation, and we're working through those lists now. We're still getting a lot of those lists back, so we're still in the process of developing them out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Since it doesn't have to do with the motion, at the end, could I just piggyback to that, to the comments about the driving?
We can do that in
Okay.
other business.
Thank you.
I'll make a note. Thank you. Okay, nothing else? You can, whenever you're ready.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to E4, adoption of the proposed school cafeteria budget for 22-23. Could I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Nodine, and a second by Mrs. Allen. Okay, I know there were some questions prior to the meeting on this. I don't know if everyone had everything answered for clarification purposes. But from what I understand, this actually isn't mandated to approve. So we could have the conversation of not needing to do this in the future if we wanted to remove it. If I'm wrong, feel free to jump up to the mic and tell me.
Do you have anything?
I'm open for conversation.
So my question was regards to the budget. Thank you very much for providing last year's. Yeah, I just don't know if there's not a comparison to last year, what is the point of having a current budget? It's supposed to be a guide, but we don't, on the budget, you didn't have insurance, applied yet. Does the school lunch fund pay for insurance, or does that come out of the general fund?
The health insurance and ERS come out of the general fund?
It just hasn't been applied yet? It was on the last line. And we don't have to get into that now. I just didn't know what if it's not,
There was an appropriation status report that was shared.
right. Okay. So is there a point to approve a cafeteria budget? It's a separate entity.
I think it's up for discussion. So, I don't know what the most effective move for us would be. Is it more to have more documentation to compare between past budgets and this budget, or maybe it's not something that we need to go this deep into voting on?
I would say that if we were going to vote on it, it would be difficult to go based off of this. I know in myself looking at it, knowing kind of the market that we're in, just looking at prior year adopted budget to current year adopted budget, in looking at like food supplies and materials and supplies that they haven't changed at all, when we know the market, the cost of everything, including delivery and fuel surcharges, are going up. So when I first looked at this, that didn't make sense to me. But now that I have seen the actual expenses, I see, okay, last year's budget really wasn't even close to what our actual expenses are. So some of those, the current year budget kind of lines up now. There are a couple of things for me that kind of still don't make sense, like with the salaries going up and Social Security going down. Mm-hmm. Those are a pretty direct correlation of, it's 7.65%. So one goes up, the other goes up. Mm-hmm. And also with ERS expense going up, but the rate itself is going down about 5% year over year. So I think I would agree with Nancy that if we were to vote on it, it would be better for us if we were actually comparing expenses, like prior year expenses, to see if this year's budget lines up with where last year ended.
So would you say that, and I only say this because I'm thinking this is the only time, but I might be wrong, the only time that we approve a subsidiary of the actual budget, where we don't approve Mrs. Hinman's, high school budget.
Correct.
So is it better that this information was more of a for-your information thing as opposed to a vote?
Yes.
And then if maybe there was something that didn't jive at that point, there would be an opportunity to ask questions, but it didn't necessarily need a vote to continue to have the cafeteria expenses.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's what I would be in line with.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the will of the board?
Yeah. I would say.
I mean,
Vice
we have a
person,
motion on the
yes.
floor now, so
Yeah.
I would say we vote this year, but if, we don't need a motion to remove something that's not mandated to be here. So, if the board is in agreement, which it looks like nobody is, and if you are, raise your hand, we would vote this year, and then in the future, we would, just ask that the superintendent maybe provide the information as part of, FYI part of a packet at some point. Does that sound agreeable to everyone?
Yeah, and,
Yes.
you know, I just want to add to that, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
You're
but
fine.
just a little bit more information is, we go back to our electronic, to the beginning of our electronic records, which was roughly 97, 98, and we've done that process, having it approved since then at least, and probably a little bit further than that. So it might have been something that just was historically a practice here in Red Creek that happened who knows when. And it's just something that we continue to do. So there's no legal requirement for you to actually approve it. You know, and it basically, I don't know, we can give you a report for informational purposes, which would make more logical sense for what the bill or the board actually will do with it, right? So that's certainly something that we can add. And Bill and I both agree. You know, neither of us have seen that type of presentation for that in our past districts either. So makes sense.
Okay. Other questions, comments? You're ready.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Okay, E5, approval of the school breakfast and lunch prices for 22-23. Could I have a motion, please? Mrs. Allen and a second by Mrs. Digman. Questions? Okay, well, I have a question. Since COVID, are they allowed to buy things and send them to the classrooms or no?
did
On
last
the
year.
On the
you're
list
talking
here?
about, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. They're able to do that. You're talking about the catering piece?
The celebrations?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right, just wondering.
I did
You
have
have a birthday party coming up.
No, but it's a great deal. I mean, you can't buy this anywhere else this cheap, so.
and those brownies.
Not exactly.
So I do want to point out that we are not increasing our prices there, you know, because of some of the things that are coming off of COVID and, you know, understanding that things have been essentially free over the course of the last couple of years. So we're sensitive to that, to our community at this point. At some point, we will start to see some of those increases because obviously costs are increasing significantly. So.
Jolene, did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to just make sure I was understanding it. Obviously, our free is free, but our reduced is free as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
Correct.
Yes.
In New York State, it is.
Currently, yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
3
any
years
other
ago.
questions?
I'm done.
2 or 3 years ago, it changed.
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I missed that.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So I just have a couple quick things. Today, our administrative team met with the University of Rochester to develop the management plan for the strategic plan. So as you know, the district went through a whole process for strategic planning. We had community members, we had students, teachers, administrators involved in the process for a significant amount of time last year. I think we met about 5 times for full days, and 4 or 5. And that was just the committee that actually worked through it. A lot of things took place. There were some surveys that went out to gather information. There were a lot of interviews that took place, and we gathered a bunch of information and really looked at the three main targets that we're going to be looking at for moving the district forward over the course of the next couple of years. So I know I've shared with you previously the strategic plan. The management plan is the how-to. It's the internal working document that the administrative team is going to use to make sure that we're on task and on target, meeting our goals as administrators to get to where we need to go. You know, there could be an example where Raina Hinman, she is the point person on, I don't know, number 3. She might not be the person doing the work, but she's the person responsible to oversee it. It might be a team of teachers in the high school that are doing the actual physical work. That plan outlines that for our internal working, so that we'll use those documents for every meeting that we really go to, but it will really significantly drive what we do as an administrative team. So that was a lot of work today. Really good work. All of our administrators that are a part of this were involved in that. And just some really good work that's going on there. What I also would like to do is I'd like to have the U of R, Bob McKevney and Lynn Ertl, come out and present to you again about the strategic planning and the process. We have not worked out a date for that, but we're starting to get some dates together for that to happen. And I think that would probably be helpful right around goal setting time for our board as well, just to help kind of solidify things as a unified piece. We're still working through filling open positions. We have open positions still in the instructional staff, clerical staff, also working towards filling long-term sub positions. A lot of our direct instructional staff are, as you know, you've approved tonight. We're moving forward with those. There's some specifically long-term sub positions that are still up in the air. We're working on that. We have done a lot of interviews over the course of the last couple of weeks, and we're pretty, we're moving in a good direction with those. There's a couple positions that are a little more challenging to fill right now. We have an anticipated math position open. That's very challenging. We're just not receiving applicants at this point in time for that. So we're still working through that process. We have a special ed position that we're currently working on. Was a little bit more challenging to fill at this point in time. We have a couple backup plans that we're working through right now that has to do with certifications and things that we're working through with the state. I think everybody sees that across the country, across New York State, across the country in general, that there's a staffing shortage for everything. So we're definitely feeling that, and we're working through that, probably at a lesser amount than some of these larger school districts, as you've seen in the news. Some of them have hundreds of open positions moving into the beginning of the school year. We do not. We do have some vacancies that we are fully intending on filling one way or another by the beginning of the school year. So we're working through those types of things. We have some construction. Capital project is wrapping up in the next couple days, so hopefully by the end of the week, all of our contractors will be off-site. We'll have some internal things to do, loading rooms and technology and those types of things, but that should be wrapped up by the end of the week. We have CSEA negotiations scheduled for tomorrow, so that's a full-day session with our committees tomorrow. And our new teacher orientation is scheduled for August 30th, 31st, and September 1st. So a lot of things going on over the course of the next week or two. There's a lot of internal things that are happening, meetings with administration teams. There's a lot of scheduling things that we're working on, specifically with special education and transportation, those types of things. So we're working through those as we do every year at this time. It's just a little bit more challenging this year, being that there's a significant staffing shortage everywhere, and I think a lot of schools are in the same boat as we are, but we're working to fill those to the best of our abilities at this point. So that's what I have for my updates. Any questions on that?
Is the strategic plan online on the website?
I can forward you a copy if you'd
Okay.
like. But it was at some point, and there's a PowerPoint I think you can find on the website. And if you can't, we'll make sure that gets up. It was up with the previous website before it actually rolled to the new website.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Speaking of the website, where are we at with board docs?
I don't have an update on board docs except for I know Missy has, I'm looking at Eric up there. I know Missy has been working through that and training on it. So she's done 2 sessions, I believe, and I'm not exactly sure what the next round is.
Okay.
I think he's coming down, so we'll give him we should just give him a microphone so he
I
can
know. He should keep one up there.
pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Right.
Maybe
Right.
he likes the steps, the extra steps.
Hated those steps when I was in high school.
Try follow your own
Yes,
rule.
follow your own instructions.
Our clerical staff, I probably muted this one. our clerical staff are being trained on board docs right now as far as putting our packets in, putting all the information in. I'm not sure what the timeline is. I know Missy Hoisington in Dr. Corey's office was training this week as far as a backup for that, just in case she's not available, making sure that we have people who are ready to do that. And then once that is done, we'll schedule some training for our board members and any other staff who are going to need it. Once we have the packets in there, the navigation is fairly simple from what I've seen. But I'm not sure what the timeline is, but I think Dr. Corey and Missy would have a little bit more information on when we're going to be rolling that out, as soon as our staff is ready to put all the packets in there.
Okay. Do you guys know if we're going to be putting any historic data into that database?
Our contract, since we cross-contract with Erie One, who actually manage all of our historical data, they are going to be putting all of that information in for us, including all of our board
Policies.
the huge-
Policies.
The policies?
the policy manual, sorry.
Yes, yes.
The
Great.
policy manual and historical documents, things like that. So we do have a record
Wonderful.
of some other things, and we will work with the Erie One to go through and make sure that we have all of that in there as well as just beyond just the current packets.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
Any other questions?
I just have a question on the administrative reports. Could we get Mr. Welcher included in those? Thank you. We did at one point, yep.
Anything else for the superintendent? Mrs. Dingman, you had some transportation. I
That's
think.
down in others. Are we down there?
Others, yes, we're there.
Okay. I asked that if we are going to have some issues with drivers, that we get a couple plans, Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. And, you know, if you are going to rely on parents to bring, speaking up, I mean, I was one of those parents that brought my daughter in every day last year. It would be nice that if you could have a drop-off time, let's say a window between 8:30 and 8:40, so then everybody's just not getting off at 8:40 and creating the long line, but just something. And then
thank you.
2, have we ever looked at CEP before?
What is
The
that?
Community Eligibility Program for the free breakfast and lunch?
Oh, yes, we don't qualify. There's 3 legs of that. We qualify for 2 of the 3.
Okay, which leg don't we qualify for?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and,
Okay,
I don't remember.
okay.
This was prior to COVID. We were looking into it. And we qualified for 2, but not the 3rd.
Okay,
I'll check into that with Pam, though.
'cause it's about your direct certs.
Yeah,
The-
yeah, I
so-
get that. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The only other question I had, I forgot to ask it earlier. The COVID certifications, how long do they have to get the full certification? Is that what it is after?
There's a window on those, their certification. I believe the one that you have in front of you, but I'm not 100% sure. It's either 2024 or 26, and I think that one was 24. So there's variations of it, but
So there isn't like a set, your COVID certification is valid for X number of years and you have to have your certification completed after X number of years?
yes, that's the window in there.
Oh, in their
Yeah,
appointment?
It should be on that appointment. That there.
Yeah, there were.
I think you have a certification in there, so it should say certification, whatever date they had it until 2000, whatever date of 2024 or 2000 and.
Okay, so that's the date that they have to have their,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, so
all right.
that's actually in the Teach system, so we
Okay.
review that frequently.
Okay.
And we'll pull those certification dates and then give reminders to people too.
I think it's important to clarify in that, though, they have passed their courses and training. It's a matter of paperwork being filed with the state at this point.
That's correct. Yep.
So
Okay.
I think that's the misunderstanding out there about the COVID certification.
Yeah, COVID certification is a real certification. It just
Yeah.
happened under
Yeah, I
the
wasn't
COVID
questioning
time,
that.
yeah. So, yep.
That's it.
Mrs. Dingman, did you have anything else?
No,
Was that the
actually
end of
2
your,
things.
okay. Anybody else have anything for public session? Okay. I would take a motion to move into executive for negotiation purposes. Mrs. Dingman and a second by Mrs. Bliss. Thank you for coming.